Welcome back, focused learners, to another explainer. Today, we are meticulously unpacking a highly concentrated, incredibly foundational text. It's called Visual Identity Blueprints for Student Designers, Logo Design Concepts for School Students. And honestly, we're going to unpack the exact roadmap hidden right there within this title. Before we really get into breaking down the terminology, I want you to ask yourself a question. What actually separates a standard drawing from a true logo design concept? And maybe more importantly, what does it take for a school student to cross that threshold and become a real designer? It isn't just about picking up a pencil or, say, opening up some software. It's an entire shift in how you approach the work. That transformative journey is exactly what our source material lays out for us today.
Okay, let's dive into this. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, Decoding Visual Identity.
So, visual identity is defined as the foundational system of visual elements that distinguishes a brand or concept. Look, before anyone can just sit down and draft a logo, they have to understand this massive overarching umbrella concept. Our source establishes this right out of the gate. You aren't just making a cool graphic here. You are literally engineering a whole system, colors, typography, shapes that communicate a very distinct personality. That's the exact mindset being established for these students from day one. Basically, visual identity equals the foundation. The source material deliberately positions this not as some afterthought, not as something you just figure out after the logo is done. No, it is the absolute starting point for any student entering the design space. It's like building a house. If the foundation is weak, the entire structure is going to collapse, right? By framing the text around visual identity first, a student's thinking is elevated from just simple illustration to strategic, purpose-driven communication. Now, what's really interesting about this next part, Section 2, the designer's blueprint. A blueprint is officially a detailed plan or structural framework used to guide the construction of something complex. Why does our source specifically promise blueprints rather than just, loose guides or tips and tricks? Well, it implies a highly structured, almost architectural approach to teaching design. A blueprint leaves absolutely zero room for pure guesswork. It gives the student measurable, actionable schematics. When you use a blueprint, you aren't just crossing your fingers and hoping for a good result. You're following a proven, reliable framework to construct a completely unified visual identity. Moving right along to Section 3, Core Logo Concepts. And this brilliantly illustrates how the source text funnels the learner. We start way up high with this massive philosophical idea of the broad framework, visual identity blueprints, and filter it right down into the specific application, which is logo design concepts. It takes you directly from the macro down to the micro. The logo itself is really just the most concentrated, actionable task derived from that much larger visual identity blueprint. Notice the deliberate focus here on mastering core concepts rather than just, rote software execution. For a school student, this is literally the most vital takeaway. Think about it. Software updates all the time, and specific aesthetic trends, they are inevitably gonna fade. But the underlying theory, like how to balance negative space or how to actually communicate through shape psychology, those are timeless concepts. Grasping the why before the how is what truly sets a student up for long-term success. Which brings us to our final key area, Section 4, Empowering School Students. Let's move to and see how this builds, because this journey maps out a very clear transformation explicitly promised by our source material. In Step 1, we start with a school student. They're full of potential, super eager, but maybe they're lacking a guiding framework. Then, moving to Step 2, they engage with the material, soaking up those foundational logo concepts using the blueprints we talked about. And finally, Step 3 happens. They become a student designer. By learning to think systematically about visual identity, their entire approach to learning and creating just completely shifts. It's a real game changer. So the crucial point is really right there in the phrasing itself. Visual identity blueprints for student designers. Notice it doesn't say for students who kind of want to draw. No, it actively validates the viewer's potential right away. It calls them designers from the very start. It's telling you that if you're willing to actually learn the framework, you aren't just some student completing a classroom assignment. You are a designer, actively crafting a professional identity. So what does this all mean for you? How will you apply these blueprints to build your own visual identity concepts? We've unpacked the framework today, and now, well, it's your turn to take this architectural approach and apply it to your own creative journey. Start building your foundation right now. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay curious, keep building those blueprints, and I'll catch you in the next one.